The M4 Max MacBook Pro is finally a gaming laptop thanks to Cyberpunk's macOS port. Now, I know there aren't a lot of games to choose from when it comes to gaming on a Mac, but I think what the team at CD Projekt Red has done with this Mac port is nothing short of incredible, and I genuinely can't wait until more developers hop on board and either develop the games for the Mac or follow some sort of their AAA titles that's been out for Windows and do a proper Mac port. So in this video, we're going to check out how Cyberpunk runs on this M4 Max MacBook Pro, but also check out how it performs on a regular M4 MacBook Pro and this M3 MacBook Air with 24 gigs of RAM. And we'll also put it up against a 5090 laptop and compare how this performs to the M4 Max MacBook Pro and basically showcase how good Cyberpunk runs natively on a Mac. All right, so how we're gonna do this is start with this. We're gonna start with the M3 MacBook Air, and then we'll move on to the M4 MacBook Pro, and then we'll move on to the M4 Max, and then of course the RTX 5090 laptop, which weighs like a brick. Now I'm gonna do my best to keep every setting the same on each laptop, but the M3 Air and M4 MacBook Pro might be turned down quite a bit because it only has so much GPU cores. But in general though, here are the settings that I'll be playing on with the M4 Max and RTX 5090 laptop. We're gonna go with 1440p resolution, Metal Effects set to quality or DLSS set to quality, VSync off, ray tracing off, everything set to high, and we'll also set the maximum FPS to 240 because that's the max that we'll get in terms of FPS for this game. We'll also be turning on and off frame gen just to see how it compares and if there's a noticeable difference there. And of course, we'll see how ray tracing performs on the M4 Max and the RTX 5090 laptop. So starting off with the 13-inch MacBook Air, which is fanless, by the way. Now I can run this game on high nor play this at 1440p, but with the For This Mac preset, we can get a steady 30 frames per second, which honestly isn't terrible, but the game doesn't look great at all. With frame gen on, I can maybe get an extra 10 to 15 frames added on, but actually playing the game, it kind of stutters when there's a ton of action happening in the game. And you can kind of get a decent session in if you turn down the resolution to 900p, but playing at that resolution on a 13-inch display or even a 15-inch display is not going to look good. Is it playable? Yes, kinda, but is it enjoyable? Probably not. All right, so moving on to the M4 MacBook Pro, we're also going to be using the same For This Mac preset, but we're just going to turn off VSync, and in this preset, we're going to get about 40 FPS, which again, not terrible, but also not great. Now with some settings tweaked, like turning on Metal Effects and setting it to performance, turning everything to medium with frame gen off, we're easily hitting 60 plus FPS. Now paired with the ProMotion display on this MacBook Pro, this runs so much smoother than what we got on the M3 MacBook Air. Now, as much as I like the For This Mac preset that Apple added onto this game, it's not going to give you the best performance. So definitely play around with the settings and turn down or turn off some settings that you may not need. Now, you obviously can play with frame gen on and you'll notice more frames, but you might also notice some input latency if your base frame rate isn't that high. So just play around with the settings and see what works best for your machine. All right, now on the M4 Max, with everything set to high, Metal Effects set to quality, frame gen off, ray tracing off at 1460p, we got an average FPS of about 96 frames per second, which honestly isn't that bad. Everything looks great and runs perfectly smooth. Now with the same settings, but with frame gen on, we can expect about 140 plus frames per second, which is great. Now I also tried the same benchmark and played it for about 45 minutes on battery, and guess what? I didn't really see a noticeable downgrade in performance or quality whatsoever. No stutters, no frame drops, and everything just ran smooth as if my MacBook Pro is plugged in. Okay, so this right here is the M4 Max running Cyberpunk 2077. And as you guys can see in the main menu, we're getting about 240 frames per second. And then once we're in the game, we're getting about 150, 160 frames per second. And this is actually plugged in right now. And so I'm going to show you guys what the performance really is when this MacBook Pro is unplugged. Okay, as you guys can see, the monitor went down. And right now we're still getting about 165 frames per second. Unplugged, playing Cyberpunk 2077. Like, this is crazy. no cuts, no nothing. And you guys can see the frame rates right there. Now, typically on Windows gaming laptops, we'll see an immediate difference in frame rates between being plugged in versus battery. So this is really great to see and a huge win for Apple here. Now up next, we're gonna test what kind of frame rates we're gonna get with the same settings, but with ray tracing on, with lighting set to ultra. And in terms of what kind of frame rates we're getting here on the M4 Max, we're getting about 35 frames per second on average without frame gen. And with frame gen on, we're seeing an average frame rate of about 65 FPS. Now, it might not be best to turn on ray tracing, so if you want a completely smooth gameplay, use my settings and turn off ray tracing altogether. And now just to give you guys some context on how insanely powerful Apple Silicon is, especially the M4 Max, I went ahead and benchmarked this RTX 5090 laptop that I just got. This is the Alienware Area-51 18-inch version. And we're gonna run the same benchmarks with the same settings at 1440p, with DLSS set to quality, frame gen off first, ray tracing off first, and I ran this benchmark a few times with the laptop unplugged and a couple of times plugged in, and these are the results that I got. Now, as you guys can see, we're hovering around 27 FPS on average with the laptop unplugged, which, truth be told, seems very, very low for a 5090 laptop, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I've tried to run this test multiple times, even with new drivers, and we're getting roughly below 30 FPS, and of course, battery life is only gonna last about 45 to 50 minutes. Now, even with frame gen on battery, we're barely hitting 55 frames per second on average. But as soon as you plug this laptop to its charger, this thing pretty much destroys the M4 Max and any other Apple laptop when it comes to gaming performance. We're seeing anywhere from 147 frames per second with these same settings to over 200 plus frames per second with frame gen turned on. Now with ray tracing on, we're getting about 75 frames per second on average without frame gen, and about 140 frames per second on average with frame gen turned on. So one thing to note here, and two advantages I know that the M4 Max MacBook Pro will have over this Alienware laptop is, number one, performance on battery. We're not seeing a difference in performance at all whether the MacBook's plugged in or not. And number two, the 16-inch M4 Max MacBook Pro can easily last well over 2 hours from 100% to 5%, which then will cripple the performance. And that's something that a 5090 laptop can't even do. While it may not beat out an RTX 5090 in terms of raw performance when plugged into a wall, it can most certainly outlast an RTX 5090 laptop without losing peak performance. And yeah, as you guys saw, gaming on a Mac is very much real, and trust me when I say this, it'll only get better from here on out. With the upcoming macOS 26 Tahoe coming later this fall, we should expect Cyberpunk and other AAA titles update their games and implement Metal 4, which should bring native frame gen and denoising so that games can look a lot better with faster frame rate and not relying on AMD's FSR technology. Now, as you guys saw, the M4 MacBook Pro, not even M4 Pro or M4 Max, can easily get 60 plus FPS on average with some minor tweaks in the settings, and that to me is really impressive. Anyways, that's been it for this video. Be on the lookout for more laptop reviews on this channel, like this 5090 laptop. And yeah, I'll catch you all in the next one.